I retired early, but this is driving me mad. I'm talking pensions and taxes. Oh my gosh. To quote the great financial advisor Avril Lavigne, why do you have to go and make it so complicated? I mean, making the decision to retire is hard enough in life. But when you start looking at the finances, it begins to get so complicated, especially when it comes to pensions and taxes, especially in the UK. I'm not sure what it's like in the US and other countries. Did you know that the UK tax and pension framework is considered one of the most intricate in the world, right? That is a fact. I mean, you see that word intricate? Just replace it with a complicated mess, because it's the same thing, yeah? It's so frustrating when you're having to deal with pension and taxes that it's not surprising that actually, compared to the rest of the world, the UK tax and pension system does feel frustratingly complicated. I'm a bright guy. I've dealt with finance. I dealt with business cases. I have a legal qualification. I can read complex documents and understand them. But boy, even I struggle trying to get my head around pensions and taxes. I mean, even this week, for instance, I had a notification about one of my pensions finally, whole different nightmare getting paid, but finally is coming through. And I noticed that one of the payments had been taxed at source. Now, I'd done my research and I'd done all my calculations, and my forecasts and stuff was based on the fact that my pension would not be taxed at source. I recognise the importance of taxes. I haven't a problem with paying my taxes. Cattle grid there. I don't have a problem with paying my taxes. I wasn't expecting it to be taxed at source. And the more I looked into it, I suddenly realised that the tax code that they've given me is a temporary tax code, and my current tax code has changed. So when you start going down that labyrinth maze, you start going down the rabbit holes of the variety of different tax codes that exist, there in itself is a level of unnecessary complication, in my opinion. So yeah, so tax and pensions, when you're retiring, especially if you're in early retirement, can be frustrating. I mean, so just dealing with that can just make you feel brain fried, confused, overawed, and just fed up, basically. So why is it? Why is the fact that the pension and taxes are so complicated, especially in the UK? And is it just to keep financial advisors and pension advisors in a job? Another little fact that I kind of realised and read when I'm researching all of this is the fact that it is so complicated. Another cattle grid. The fact that it is so complicated actually costs money to run. It's costing the government money just to deal with the complexity of the tax and pension system, which in itself just sounds crazy. Now, this is not a political diatribe about any one kind of political flavour. If you're one of these people that kind of blame your current situation on the current government, then I'm afraid you're a little bit naive. Situations don't occur overnight like this, especially with finance and tax and pensions. It is something that has evolved over decades, if not hundreds of years. And the same with the state of the country. The state of the country is not the result of the people who've been in power for the last 6 months, 12 months, really. It is the result of whoever's been in power, whether that's changed hands or not, over the last 20, 30 years. If you feel your country is in a state of decay, that's not an overnight decay. Decay doesn't happen overnight. Decay happens over successive mismanagement. Anyway, that's the closest thing I'm going to get to politically. What I'm just talking about is the inherent complexity of pension and taxes. And is there a better solution? So let's dive into that a little bit more as I go and do some shopping. Actually, if I could just interrupt this video, I just noticed that my previous video, roughly 80% of people who watched that video haven't subscribed. So if you're one of those people, it would really help me, help the algorithm, help other people looking for content like this. If you hit that subscribe button, yeah? Toggle that notification bell, because it will be a massive, massive help. And in return, I'll try and make these videos as informative, educative, and entertaining as possible. So hit that subscribe. Back to me. Originally, old age pensions were brought in the UK in 1908. And then over the next 100 of years, we've had sort of successive changes and updates and renewals and refreshes and things thrown out and things introduced and attempts to simplify things. And then we end up where we currently are. And in terms of taxes, well, income tax was introduced by William Pitt the Younger in 1799 to help fight the Napoleonic Wars. Thanks, Napoleon. So there, don't be blaming your current government for taxes. You know, blame Napoleon. Anyway, and then they were later abolished because they were about as popular as a bag of sick. But they were reintroduced by Sir Robert Peel, he who introduced the idea of a police force, actually, interestingly enough. That's why they were called peelers, much later. And so then we have income tax. And then again, over the next 100 and 150 years, various tax were introduced, replaced, reforms made, and so on and so on. So you had, estate tax was replaced by inheritance tax, which is a big bugbear at the moment, especially in the UK, because that's been changed. And that change itself to inheritance tax and the response and the sort of backlash against it is indicative of one of the biggest problems that we have. And most countries also face the same thing. What you end up with, a system, a framework, has been constantly tinkered with, adapted, changed, and it's become like a kind of a labyrinth, Heath Robinson type machine. But what you end up with is where we're at now, the mess that we're in now, the stew we're in now. Basically, the patchwork of tax that we have now. The same with pensions, a patchwork. And it's not even a neat patchwork, a messy patchwork of pension framework and a messy patchwork of tax framework. The problem is, with each successive government, you have what we call the path dependency trap. Basically, that means that they are always very reluctant to radically change anything. They might tinker with things here and now. It always strikes me that tax and pensions, because they're so kind of intricately linked, is a constant battle of whack-a-mole. You know, the government is constantly trying to tinker to find a new way to raise tax because, you know, the country needs it. We can go into why the country needs it, and you can argue about the mismanagement of the tax revenues and all of that. But look, we need to be taxed, I'm sorry to say, but it would be nice if that was managed or the country had been managed more effectively over the last 25, 30 years. However, we are where we are. As they say, the two things you can depend on in life are taxes and death. Governments, whilst are reluctant to do any radical overhauls because for fear of scaring off the electorate, they'll tinker around the edges and try to kind of, as I say, play whack-a-mole as new tax laws come in to sort of stop people from finding loopholes, and then accountants and financial advisors and strategists find new loopholes, and so then the government have to find a way to shut that down, whack that mole down, and then creative types find another way to sort of get round it, and that mole is whacked down, and you just get a complicated mess. And as I said, this path dependency trap is people are reluctant to kind of undo the mess. Sometimes I do stuff in IT or software or anything, you know, or build something, a DIY, and it's so complicated that you kind of end up where you are and it's sort of all right. You know deep down that you should go back and just trash it all and start again, but it was so complicated and so hard getting to the point that you're at now that you'll go, oh, I don't know, that'll do. I don't really want to untangle that knotted mess. So that's where we kind of basically are with, you know, taxes and pensions. And it's so complicated. There are so many abbreviations, you know, like your SERPs, your IHTs, all these kind of different things. There's millions of them. And don't get me started on the tax code. As I said earlier, I realised my first pension payment had been taxed. Not a lot, you know, it's just the first one, just to make up for the fact they're catching up and they were late by a couple of weeks. My tax code changing and me getting my first pension payment overlapped. And so the pension company just put it on what they call BR, which is not BS, which sometimes it sounds like it's a load of BS. No, BR, which is like basic rate. It's what companies or pensions do when they don't know what your tax code is, or they're waiting for your tax code from the government or whatever, They just go, oh, just stick it on BR, which is basic rate. So yeah, you just pay, in the UK, you just pay 20% straight out the gate, even if you're still within your personal threshold. So for instance, in the UK, the first £12,500 that you earn in a year is tax-free. And then you start paying 20% on tax above that point. And then you get to, I think it's like 45, 50, you pay a bit more. But anyway, a progressive tax system. And I'm all for progressive tax systems. I don't have a problem with it. In fact, I think the progressive tax system should be more progressive. Honestly, the people who get up in arms about the threat to increase taxes on the rich, I mean, really? It's not a question about taxing all their wealth. If you've got 10 million quid, you're paying 50% tax on everything over and above 125 grand. Could you pay a little bit more tax for everything that you earn over 10 million pound? Like really, just maybe another 5% or something like that? Are you really going to be out of pocket? You're not going to be down the dole office, are you? Anyway, again, I don't want to get political. You might disagree with me, but I'm all for a progressive tax system. It is the fairest system in principle. I just wish it was slightly more fairer. I mean, just to add into the mix there, I think the personal tax allowance should raise to 20 grand. That would just take so many people out of poverty. If you just raised your personal tax limit, so the first 20 grand, you don't pay any tax, it would just make people who are struggling, people who suffer in this country, because they're the ones that unfortunately bear the brunt of the tax burden, not the super rich, it would just alleviate them. And yes, the middle class, the people in the middle, you'd be the ones that, you know, take the burden. Well, you just offset that bit by maybe taxing the people who got 10 million quid or more. Anyway, I'm not running for Parliament or anything like that. The point is, there are so many, you know, it's so complicated, these different levels, the different tax codes. And as I said, I went to the government website to check. Now, I'm a savvy guy. I'm an IT guy. I have an online government account, so I can go in. I had it from ages ago. And in fairness, the tax office and, you know, HMRC have updated their online kind of presence, and you can go on there, you can see how much tax you paid, what your tax codes are, what your tax prediction for the year is, all these sort of things, whether you've paid into your national insurance, which in the UK is the tax that you pay on all your earnings, that's something called national insurance. And then that means that you can then claim state pension at 67. So anyway, the point is, it's quite complicated registering online, and you have a nice kind of long access code and stuff like that. And I'm IT savvy. I'm used to all that. I love all that kind of. I love everything online. I want to do everything online. Yeah, apart from the obvious. But even that I do online. No, but the point is, if you're a bit older than me, or maybe a bit less IT savvy, it can be a bit intimidating dealing with all this stuff online, and yet all the information is there. Part of that is you get all your tax codes, and oh my God, that's when you realise how complicated it is. There are so many tax codes, and that's where I realised, oh, they've just taxed me that BR. I had to look it up. Thank heaven for the, thank heaven for the internet that you could look these things up. That's where I realised, oh, I have got a new tax code, and I realised what had happened is that, as I said, the tax code changing because I'd left my job and now retired, and the pension company sorting out my pension, they sort of are not knowing what the tax code is. They are kind of overlapped. So look, I wrote to the pension company. I asked them to explain because I was confused by it all. I didn't understand. Could they break it down? I had a rough idea what had happened, but I wanted them to explain it to me. And they kind of said, yeah, we didn't know what your tax code was at the time. And once you get the new tax code, they'll refund that money that they paid. As I said, it's not a lot, but in my calculations, I'd assumed that I would be dealing with my tax at the end of the year. A bit like in America, where you have to sort of submit all your tax forms at the end of the year. In the UK, you don't have to do that if you're working, because it's pay as you earn, and you're taxed at source. And so there shouldn't really be any other sort of tax you have to deal with. But if you're self-employed, if you've got a pension, anything like that, then yeah, you have to do your sort of taxes at the end of the year like everybody else. And that in itself is, super complicated. And as I said, I often think it's just keep accountants and financial advisors in employ. I don't know. Let me know in the comments down below what you think. And the thing is, Dealing with your finances, I don't know where I'm going here. It's a path. I've never been here before. Somebody's private residence. Oh no, the path goes on. Well, I didn't know that. It's a whole new world. A whole new world. Berkshire trout. Strange. The biggest worries I have retiring early is the finance and whether I've made the right calculations. Like I've talked about it before on this channel. You know, I revisited my calculations so many times. I did the research. I looked into tax, even though it's super complicated. I kind of think I've got the most tax efficient system. I'm aware if I can kind of, rely more on the tax-free money that I get from my pension, so I get a tax-free lump sum, use that and therefore take less actual taxable income, keep it low, and bearing in mind that the first 12.5 grand is tax-free, then, you can manage your tax. But along with just the very worry of finance when you retire early, especially like me, you're saying, okay, I'm going to reduce my lifestyle. I understand I'm not going to have maybe as much money or the assurance of a big salary coming in, but equally I've tried to eliminate all my big costs so I can actually achieve financial independence, but there will be some sacrifices. There's a small ceiling to my calculations. And so there is that constant worry. You add into that worry and concern the whole complexity of pensions and taxes, it's really worrying. And yeah, I did seek, advice from an advisor, but that costs money. That's what I'm saying is it almost, the principle is, yeah, you go to a tax advisor or a financial advisor and the idea is they'll save you money. But in a way, they're only going to really save you money if you've got like a massive investment. And then the amount that you're paying them is worth it because it will probably completely, they'll find an efficient tax system or an efficient pension system that will more than offset any payment that you make to them. And in fact, I've seen some videos where people warn that you could drain some of your resources by relying on, investment advisors, especially because they're going to take their cut of their investments. And are you better off doing it yourself and things like that? And it's a kind of just another layer of decision making that you're going to have to factor in, another level of worry and all of that, because things seem so complicated. Like anything in life with me, I've tried to simplify my life. I've tried to simplify my finances. Take, for instance, my redundancy. It was never very clear when the redundancy would be paid, but the very point of redundancy is for a company to write off a large amount of money in one tax year so that the following tax year, they don't have that sort of large payroll. That's the sort of principle of redundancies. They're doing it so that they can write it off in one tax year. So in principle, it means they have to pay you in the tax year that they want to write off. Now, unfortunately, that often means it's also the tax year in which you've been earning money. So you're already in a higher tax level, or you've already used up all your tax allowances, or you've been pushed into a higher tax rate or whatever it is. Then you get a big voluntary redundancy sum or whatever it is, and that just potentially pushes you into a higher tax bracket, and so you pay tax on that. The difference between them paying it in the next financial year is significant, but I was unsure when they would pay me, so I had two calculations. Now obviously for my financial forecasts, I went for the lower. I went for the assumption that they would pay me in the tax year that I was actually earning money, and therefore I'd pay more tax on it than if they didn't. But not knowing exactly when they would pay, even though in principle I knew roughly that why they had to pay it and when they had to, there was no guarantee that that would be done because already the timetable of the redundancy process had already been delayed by a month. So that's made it all complicated and tight and compressed. They literally paid it on the last day of the tax year. They just in time. I kind of left on the 28th of March. And then they paid me the following week. Bear in mind the tax year sort of ends April the 5th. They paid me like the 1st, 2nd of April, something like that. So they just got it in there. But anyway, I'd accounted for that, but it would have been nice because my financial advisor, ironically enough, calculated my final sort of redundancy sum another 15, 20K more than I sort of originally calculated, assuming the tax. He hadn't factored in the fact that, that I was going to get it in the same financial year that I was earning. But yeah, so I've run things past my financial advisor and he kind of said, yeah, it's all fine, it's all cool. As I said, it's taken me a lot of research, a lot of reading, a lot of watching YouTube videos, collating, cogitating, all of that, to feel confident that my forecasts and planning was all right. But as I said, I'd like to think I'm a bright guy. I know my way around things. But you watch these videos from these financial advisors and pension advisors, and you know, the thumbnails going, oh, you could be losing out on tens of thousands if you don't do this one trick. You know, there's thumbnails, and I get it. Hey, look, I'm a YouTuber. I know, you know, the importance of a sort of a clickbaity thumbnail, but you start watching it because you think, oh my God, am I losing out on all this money? And then they start explaining a real kind of complex scenario, and you just think, oh my God. I mean, it makes sense once you've bottomed it all out, but you just think, I didn't know that. The amount of times through the process of me working out whether I could retire early, what the calculations were, what the considerations I needed to take on board, the forecasting. I've said before in another video, I completely scrapped and redid my whole financing approach 3 times. And then on that third one, I double checked it like a gazillion times, because each time I watched another video or I went to a workshop where they explained the tax system or the pension system, and I had like light bulb moments, or I go, I did not know that. I mean, I've talked about life being a constant learning journey, having a mindset growth, i.e. you never stop learning. And boy, when you start getting into the complexity of tax and pension, yeah, you never stop learning. I mean, I have people approaching me all the time, you know, financial advisors, tax advisors, saying, if you want any, you know, because of these videos, if you want any help on your tax advice, let me know. And I'll probably, you know, connect with some of them and find out and just see whether I'm doing everything right. But I'm pretty sure, but just the complexity of it makes you worry, makes you concerned. Even though, like I said, like anything in life, you do the maths and you think, I'm pretty sure. And then sure enough, a video comes along, or a YouTube video or something like that, or you read something and you just think, wait a minute, I think I'm there. I think I'm good. This is a really interesting walk. I've never been on this walk before. As we said, to quote Avril Lavigne, like I did earlier, why'd you have to go and make it so complicated? It just adds another level of concern, another pop song for my kids who love 21 Pilots, another level of concern. It just adds another level of concern and worry for what is a major step in your life. And yeah, get advice, but sometimes even the advice from the gurus, they talk to you and you could just look at them with a blank expression going, I don't even think you're talking English anymore. Like the words and phrases and the acronyms that you're using make no sense to me. I mean, ask them to, it's like AI or something. You should prompt these people, say, talk to me like I'm a 10-year-old and explain it to me like that, because it is so complicated. Challenge them. Challenge your financial advisors to talk to you like a 10-year-old. Explain it like they're explaining it to a 10-year-old and see if they can. Because if they can't, then maybe it's just too complicated. Anyway, I just want to share that little rant, a little bit of history of tax and pensions and all of that. Let me know what you think in the comments down below as ever. And if you've enjoyed this video, do me a massive favor, please. Hit those likes, because I like it, YouTube likes it, and it helps people like you find content just like this. And if you're new to my channel, then do me the great favor, please hit that subscribe button, toggle that notification bell, and that way you'll know when I upload videos just like this. Talking of videos just like this, why don't you check out the videos here, these ones here? Yeah? I think you like them. These ones here, absolutely love them. Anyway, thanks for watching.